The year was 2347, and humanity had spread across 12 star systems in the galaxy. They were a young species, curious and full of hope, building colonies on distant worlds and dreaming of a bright future among the stars. Children played in domed cities on Mars, while farmers grew crops under artificial suns on planets that had never known life before. Humanity believed the universe was a place of wonder and endless possibility. They did not know about the Vethkai. The Vethkai Dominion was an ancient empire of reptilian creatures that ruled over 300 worlds. They had conquered dozens of species over millions of years, and they saw themselves as the rightful masters of the galaxy. Their scales were dark green, and their eyes were cold yellow, and they looked upon other species the way a boot looks upon an insect beneath it. When their scouts discovered humanity spreading across new star systems, the Vethkai High Council gathered to discuss this new species. They watched recordings of human cities and human ships and human families living their simple lives. The Supreme Overlord, a massive creature named Kethvora, made the decision in less than 1 hour. "These warm-blooded vermin breed too quickly," he declared to his council. "They will become a nuisance if we allow them to spread further. We will burn them out now while they are still weak." There was no warning sent to humanity. There was no declaration of war. There was no demand for surrender. The Vethkai did not believe humans deserved such courtesies. On what humans would later call the Day of Fire, the Vethkai battle fleets appeared in the skies above 7 human colony worlds at exactly the same moment. The colonists looked up and saw massive warships blocking out their suns, and they had only minutes to feel fear before the bombardment began. Nuclear fire rained down from orbit. Cities that had taken decades to build were reduced to ash in seconds. Millions of people died without ever knowing who was killing them or why. Families were vaporized in their homes, workers were incinerated at their jobs, and children vanished in flashes of terrible light. On Earth itself, the human homeworld, the Vethkai focused their attack on the largest cities. Shanghai disappeared under a mushroom cloud that could be seen from space. Lagos burned so hot that the ground turned to glass. Sao Paulo, London, Mumbai, and Cairo all suffered the same fate. The Vethkai ships moved across the planet like farmers burning weeds from a field. Admiral Yuki Tanaka was commanding a patrol fleet near Jupiter when the attack began. She received distress signals from every human world at the same time, and her blood turned to ice as she realized what was happening. She ordered her ships to race toward Earth, but she knew they would arrive too late. By the time her damaged flagship limped into Earth orbit, the Vethkai were already gone. They had completed their work and departed, leaving behind a world covered in smoke and fire. Admiral Tanaka stood on her bridge surrounded by the bodies of crew members who had died during a brief battle with Vethkai fighters, and she stared at the burning planet below. "How many?" she asked her surviving officers. "We are still counting," a young lieutenant replied, his voice shaking. "The colonies are gone, Admiral. All 7 of them. And on Earth, the estimates suggest over 4 billion dead in the first hour alone." Admiral Tanaka closed her eyes and gripped the railing in front of her. Admiral Tanaka closed her eyes and gripped the railing in front of her. Closed her eyes and gripped the railing in front of her. She thought of her daughter who had lived in Shanghai, her parents who had retired to a small town outside Lagos, her friends scattered across the murdered worlds. They were all gone now, turned to atoms by creatures who had never even bothered to learn their names. "The total across all worlds," the lieutenant continued, "appears to be approximately 14 billion dead. 14 billion. 1/3 of all humans who had ever lived in space. Wiped out in 6 hours by an enemy humanity had never met." Admiral Tanaka opened her eyes and looked around at her surviving crew. She saw fear on their faces, shock, grief, and despair. But she also saw something else burning behind their tears. She saw the same cold fire that was now burning in her own heart. She walked to the communication console and opened a channel to every surviving human vessel, every bunker still broadcasting, every refugee ship fleeing into the darkness between stars. Her voice was calm when she spoke, almost gentle, and that made her words even more terrifying. This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the Earth Defense Fleet. I am transmitting the sensor data we captured during the attack. You will see the enemy ships. You will see their weapons. You will see their faces. She paused and took a deep breath. Record everything. Memorize every detail. Teach your children what these creatures look like. Because I am making you a promise right now on the ashes of our dead. We will find them. We will hunt them across every star and every galaxy if we must. And we will never, ever stop. Far away in Vethkai space, the victory celebrations had already begun. The Supreme Overlord accepted congratulations from his admirals and toasted to the successful extermination of the human pest. His advisors assured him that the survivors would scatter and die within a generation. Too few and too broken to ever rebuild. Should we send scouts to confirm the extermination? One admiral asked. The Supreme Overlord laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. Why waste resources? No species has ever recovered from such devastation. In 100 years, no one will even remember these humans existed. He was wrong. In the ruins of Earth, in the shattered colonies, in the refugee ships drifting through cold space, the survivors were not scattering. They were gathering. They were counting their dead and recording the names of the murdered. They were making lists and drawing plans and swearing oaths that would bind their children and their grandchildren and every generation after. The Vethkai believed they had solved the human problem with fire and death. They did not understand that they had not destroyed humanity. They had only made humanity angry. They had given humans a purpose that would burn brighter than any sun and last longer than any star. The hunt was about to begin. 50 years passed after the Day of Fire, and the galaxy forgot about humanity. The great empires and trading federations of known space removed human worlds from their maps. They marked those systems as dead zones, places of radiation and ruin where no sensible species would ever travel. Merchants avoided the region, explorers stayed away, and the Vethkai Dominion never bothered to check on the ashes they had left behind. This was exactly what humanity wanted. Beneath the surface of burned worlds, human survivors had been digging. They carved cities into bedrock and built factories in caverns that went miles deep. On frozen moons that the Vethkai had ignored, hidden colonies grew under domes of ice and metal. Generation ships that had fled the attack drifted through empty space, their passengers living and dying in the void while they searched for safe harbors. The survivors found each other slowly over the decades. Secret communication networks spread from system to system, using frequencies and codes that alien sensors could not detect. Leaders emerged from the chaos, people who had lost everything and everyone they loved, and they gathered to decide the future of their species. In a hidden bunker beneath the ruins of what had once been Antarctica, the Human Continuity Collective was born. Representatives from every surviving group came together for the first Great Council. They were miners from asteroid colonies, and farmers from underground bunkers, and engineers from refugee fleets. They were scientists who had hidden their research, and soldiers who had survived impossible battles, and teachers who had kept human knowledge alive in the darkness. An old man named Kofi Asante stood before them all. He had been a diplomat before the attack, a man who believed in peace and cooperation between species. His wife and 4 children had died on Earth, burned alive in their home while he watched helplessly from a ship in orbit. The gentle diplomat was gone now, replaced by something harder and colder. We must decide what kind of species we will become, he told the gathered survivors. We can scatter and hide and hope that the Vethkai forget we exist. We can try to rebuild quietly and pray they never find us. We can become shadows, ghosts, a broken people waiting to fade away. He paused and looked around the room at the faces of his fellow humans. Every one of them had lost someone. Every one of them carried grief like a stone in their chest. Every one of them remembered the fire. Or we can choose another path. We can become hunters. We can dedicate everything we are and everything we will ever be to a single sacred purpose. We can make the Vethkai pay for what they have done, not just for ourselves, but for the 14 billion souls who can no longer speak for themselves. A young woman stood up in the crowd. Her name was Elena Vasquez, and she had been a child on the day of the attack, one of the few survivors pulled from the ruins of Snow Paulo. How long will this take? She asked. The Vethkai rule 300 worlds. They have fleets we cannot match, and technology we do not understand. How long before we can fight them? Kofi Asante smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I do not know. It may take 100 years. It may take 1,000. It may take longer than any of us can imagine. But that does not matter. We will build a society designed for patience. We will raise our children to continue the work, and their children after them, and every generation after that until the job is done. The council debated for days, but in the end, the vote was nearly unanimous. The Human Continuity Collective adopted a new constitution with one article that could never be changed, never be removed, never be forgotten. They called it the Doctrine of Eternal Memory. The doctrine was simple. It declared that the complete destruction of the Vethkai dominion was the permanent and unchanging goal of all human civilization. No human government could ever make peace with the Vethkai. No human leader could ever forgive them. The hunt would continue until the last Vethkai was dead or until the last human was dead, whichever came first. They chose extinction as their answer to the human question, Kofi Asante declared as he signed the doctrine into law. We accept their terms. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. There will only be vengeance, served cold across the centuries. The collective began to transform human society into a machine built for revenge. Schools taught children about Vethkai biology, their language, their culture, and their weaknesses. Every student learned to recognize a Vethkai ship on sight and knew the locations of their major worlds. History classes focused on the Day of Fire, with recordings of the attack played so that no child would ever forget what had been done. Scientists abandoned peaceful research and focused entirely on weapons. They developed new types of shields and engines and missiles. They created biological agents designed to kill only Vethkai. They built ships that could hide from any sensor and strike without warning. Every breakthrough was dedicated to the cause. Engineers constructed hidden shipyards in the hearts of asteroids. They built factories that could produce warships in secret. They designed vessels meant for one purpose only, to hunt and kill the enemies of humanity. Soldiers trained in new forms of warfare. They learned infiltration and assassination and sabotage. They practiced patience, waiting for months or years for the perfect moment to strike. They were taught that a quick death was a gift the Vethkai did not deserve. Generation after generation, humans were raised with hatred in their hearts and purpose in their souls. They never forgot the 14 billion. They never stopped planning. They never gave up hope that one day the hunt would begin. And in the darkness of human space, the first hunter ships were being built. They were small and fast and invisible to sensors. They had crews of volunteers who knew they might never return home. They carried weapons that had never been tested and raids that had been building for 50 years. Elena Vasquez, no longer a child, but now a commander in the new human navy, stood on the bridge of the first hunter ship ready to depart. "Today we are ghosts," she told her crew. "But one day we will be nightmares. One day the Vethkai will look up at their skies and see death coming for them. And they will finally understand that killing us was the worst mistake they ever made." The ship slipped away into the darkness, beginning the long journey toward Vethkai space. The hunt had begun. 120 years after the Day of Fire, a Vethkai border colony went silent. The colony was called Desser Minor, and it was home to 8,000 Vethkai citizens. They were farmers and miners and their families, living quiet lives in a world far from the center of the Dominion. One day, they sent their regular reports to the regional governor. The next day, there was nothing. The governor sent a patrol ship to investigate. The soldiers who landed on Desser Minor found the strangest thing they had ever seen. The buildings were intact. The farms were untouched. The power was still running, and the food was still fresh in the kitchens. But there were no Vethkai anywhere. 8,000 people had simply vanished. The soldiers searched every building and every field. They found no bodies, no blood, no signs of battle. It was as if the colonists had simply stopped existing in the middle of an ordinary day. The only unusual thing they discovered was a monument in the center of town, a black stone obelisk that had not been there before. The obelisk was covered in writing, 7 names carved into the dark stone in perfect Vethkai script. The soldiers did not recognize the names at first. They were strange words, alien words, names like New Shanghai and Hope's Landing and Terra Nova. One young soldier who had studied ancient history felt his scales grow cold as he realized what he was reading. "These are the human colonies," he whispered. "The ones we destroyed 120 years ago. Someone has listed all 7 of them." The patrol ship rushed back to report this discovery, but the regional governor dismissed their concerns. Humans were extinct. Everyone knew this. The obelisk was probably the work of some strange cult or a prank by bored colonists who would run away to start a new life somewhere else. The matter was closed and forgotten. Then another colony disappeared. This time, it was a mining station on a distant moon. 300 workers gone without a trace. Again, there was no damage, no signs of violence, just empty rooms and abandoned equipment. And in the center of the station, a black obelisk with the same 7 names. The Dominion began to worry. Military investigators were sent to both sites but found nothing useful. The disappearances made no sense. Who could take thousands of people without leaving any evidence? Who would build monuments to dead alien worlds? Rumors began to spread through Vethkai space. Miners whispered about ghost ships that appeared on no sensors. Soldiers told stories of shadows moving in the darkness between stars. Parents warned their children about the spirits of the dead humans who came to take revenge on the living. The High Council dismissed these rumors as superstition. The Vethkai were a proud and ancient race. They did not believe in ghosts, but they could not explain the disappearing colonies. Over the next 50 years, 23 more settlements vanished. Sometimes there were years between incidents, and sometimes several colonies would disappear in the same month. The attacks seemed random, striking wealthy worlds and poor outposts with equal likelihood. The only pattern was the black obelisks that always appeared, always bearing the same 7 names. A military historian named Sarah Vaughan became obsessed with solving the mystery. She was a brilliant scholar who had written dozens of books about Vethkai military victories. Now she spent her days studying the disappearances, searching for any clue that might explain what was happening. She noticed things that others had missed. The attacks always targeted isolated communities where a quick response was impossible. The timing was never random, but carefully chosen to avoid patrol routes. Whoever was doing this had detailed knowledge of Vethkai military movements. The Zara dug deeper into history, reading ancient reports about the human extermination. She found recordings of the attack, sensor data from Vethkai ships, and reports from commanders who had carried out the bombardment. And she found something that made her blood run cold. Human escape ships had fled during the attack. Thousands of vessels had scattered into deep space, carrying survivors to unknown destinations. The Vethkai had never bothered to hunt them down because they assumed the refugees would die in the void. They survived, the Zara realized. The humans survived, and they have been hiding all this time. They are the ones taking our people. They are building those monuments as warnings. She requested an audience with the High Council to present her findings. She spent weeks preparing her evidence, organizing her arguments, making certain that every fact was documented and verified. Finally, she stood before the most powerful Vethkai in the Dominion and told them the truth. They laughed at her. Humans were primitive creatures. Supreme Overlord Kethvar III, grandson of the original attacker, told her with contempt. They could never have developed the technology to do what you describe. And even if a few survived, they would be scattered and broken, too weak to threaten us. Your theory is fantasy, Scholar Vaughn. The Zara tried to argue, but the council refused to listen. They mocked her research and dismissed her evidence. When she persisted, they removed her from her position and banned her from the military archives. Her career was destroyed because she had dared to suggest that the mighty Vethkai had something to fear. But the Zara did not stop her research. She continued in secret, gathering more evidence, building a case that could not be ignored. She knew she was right, and she was determined to prove it. One night she was working late in her home, surrounded by documents and recordings. She heard a noise behind her and turned to find a figure standing in the shadows. It was a creature she had only seen in ancient recordings, a soft-skinned being with 2 arms and 2 legs and eyes that burned with cold hatred. A human. You are very clever, Scholar Vaughn, the human said in perfect Vethkai. You almost warned them in time. The Zara tried to scream, but something struck her neck and she collapsed. Her last sight before darkness took her was the human leaning over her desk, leaving a small piece of paper next to her research. When investigators found her empty house the next morning, they discovered the note. It was written in an alien language that scholars eventually translated. The message was simple. 14 billion. We are keeping count. The whispers of doom were growing louder. 300 years after the Day of Fire, humanity stopped hiding. The Vethkai had spent decades searching for their invisible enemy. They had doubled their patrols and upgraded their sensors and fortified their colonies. They had convinced themselves that whatever was attacking them was small and weak, a minor annoyance that would eventually be crushed. They believed they were still the masters of their space. They were wrong. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Memory, and watched her fleet emerge from hiding. 1,000 warships appeared from the shadows. Vessels that had been built in secret shipyards, hidden inside asteroids and dead moons. They were beautiful and terrible, sleek designs covered in weapons that the Vethkai had never seen before. Admiral Chun was the great-great-granddaughter of a woman who had survived the destruction of Shanghai. Every member of her family for 4 generations had served in the human navy. Every one of them had trained for this moment, the day when humanity would reveal itself and begin the true war. Open a channel to all ships, Admiral Chun commanded. Let them hear our voices. The communications officer obeyed, and Admiral Chun spoke to her fleet with pride burning in her heart. For 300 years we have waited. For 300 years we have prepared. For 300 years the Vethkai have wondered what was hunting them in the darkness. Today they learn the answer. Today they learn that humanity remembers. Today the hunt becomes a war. The fleet advanced toward Desser Prime. the largest military installation in this sector of HFY space. It was home to 40 warships and 2 orbital stations and the most prestigious military academy in the Dominion. The HFY believed it was invincible. They discovered their mistake very quickly. Human ships moved faster than anything the HFY had ever seen. Their weapons cut through HFY shields like they were not even there. Their tactics were strange and unpredictable, nothing like the rigid formations that HFY commanders expected. The Battle of Desser Prime lasted 3 days. HFY reinforcements rushed to defend the station, but they arrived too late and died too quickly. The humans destroyed 40 warships and both orbital stations. They reduced the military academy to rubble. They killed over 200,000 HFY soldiers and officers. Humanity lost 12 ships. When the battle ended, Admiral Chun looked at the wreckage floating in space and felt no joy. This was not about celebration. This was about justice. This was about teaching the HFY that their crimes had consequences. Send the message to the Dominion High Council, she ordered. Tell them that humanity has returned. Tell them that we remember the 14 billion. Tell them that we will never stop until the debt is paid. The message was received with terror throughout HFY space. For 3 centuries, they had believed their ghost hunters were a small group, perhaps a few ships with limited resources. Now they learned the truth. Humanity had rebuilt itself into a civilization of 40 billion people. They had technology that surpassed anything the HFY could build. They had been watching and learning and preparing all this time. But humanity did not press their advantage. They did not try to conquer territory or win a quick victory. The Human Continuity Collective had planned this war for centuries, and they were in no hurry. Instead of invasion, the humans chose exhaustion. They struck supply lines and destroyed shipyards. They assassinated generals and sabotaged weapons factories. They appeared without warning, killed everything they could find, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Every attack was designed to hurt the HFY without risking too many human lives. The Dominion tried to fight back, but they could never predict where the humans would strike. They spread their forces across hundreds of worlds, but the humans always found the weakest points. They built new fleets, but the humans destroyed the shipyards before the vessels could be completed. They trained new officers, but the humans killed them before they could gain experience. Other species in the galaxy watched the war with horror. Some of them tried to help, sending diplomats to negotiate peace between the two sides. The diplomats met with human ambassadors and pleaded for mercy. The war has gone on long enough, one alien ambassador argued. The HFY have suffered greatly. Surely you can find it in your hearts to forgive. The human ambassador, a cold-eyed woman named Sarah Okonkwo, listened politely and then responded. How many HFY have died in this war? Perhaps 50 million? Perhaps 100 million? The HFY killed 14 billion of our people in 6 hours. When they have lost 14 billion, when every HFY family has felt the pain that every human family felt, then perhaps we can discuss forgiveness. Until then, the hunt continues. The diplomats left with their heads bowed, understanding at last that no negotiation was possible. Years became decades and decades became centuries. The Human Continuity Collective grew stronger with each passing year. They built new colonies and welcomed new generations of soldiers. Their technology continued to advance while the HFY fell further and further behind. The Dominion crumbled. Their allies abandoned them, unwilling to draw human attention. Their economy collapsed as resources were diverted to endless defense. Their population shrank as young HFY refused to have children in a world that seemed to have no future. Some HFY tried to surrender. They sent messages begging for peace, offering anything the humans wanted. They would give up territory, pay reparations, punish the descendants of those who had ordered the original attack. They would do whatever it took to end the nightmare. The humans always sent the same response. The doctrine of eternal memory cannot be changed. The debt is 14 billion lives. You chose extinction as your solution. We have accepted your terms. And still the hunt continued. Generation after generation, human ships prowled through Vethkai space. They struck without mercy and vanished without trace. They were patient and persistent and absolutely unstoppable. The Vethkai had once been proud conquerors who ruled 300 worlds. Now they were refugees, fleeing from system to system, hiding from the hunters who followed them everywhere. Their empire was gone, their power was broken, and their only future was extinction. The humans had promised to hunt them forever. They were keeping that promise. 1,000 years had passed since the Day of Fire. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. New empires had risen and fallen. Species had evolved and gone extinct. Stars had been born and others had died. A millennium was a long time. Long enough for most civilizations to forget their ancient histories. Humanity had not forgotten. The Human Continuity Collective had grown into the most powerful civilization in the galactic arm. They ruled over 1,000 worlds and their population, numbered in the trillions. They had built wonders that other species could barely imagine. Cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants and stations that orbited black holes. They were artists and scientists and explorers and dreamers. They were also still hunting. The Vethkai Dominion no longer existed. Their empire had collapsed centuries ago. Their worlds abandoned, their fleets reduced to dust. Perhaps 5 million Vethkai still lived, scattered refugees hiding in the darkest corners of the galaxy. They changed their appearance with surgery and technology. They changed their names, and their languages, and their cultures. They did everything they could to disappear. It was never enough. The Office of Eternal Memory maintained a database of every known Vethkai genetic signature. They tracked family lines across generations and followed refugees across star systems. Hunter teams, volunteers who dedicated their entire lives to the mission, searched endlessly for the survivors. When they found Vethkai, they offered a choice. The refugees could surrender and move to a designated reservation world, a single planet where they would live under permanent human observation. They would be fed and housed, but they would never be free. They would spend the rest of their lives knowing that humanity was watching their every move, or they could choose death. Some humans had begun to question the hunt. A movement had grown over the centuries. People who believed that the Vethkai had suffered enough. They argued that continuing the persecution served no purpose, that the creatures hiding in the shadows were not the same ones who had ordered the Day of Fire. The war criminals are dead, argued a senator named Marcus Okafor at a session of the Human Parliament. Their children are dead, and their grandchildren are dead. The Vethkai who survived today were born into a universe where they were already hunted. They have never known peace. Is this not punishment enough? The Parliament listened to his words with respect because Senator Okafor was a good man with genuine compassion in his heart. But when the vote was called, his proposal to end the hunt was defeated by an overwhelming margin. The doctrine of eternal memory could not be changed. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka VII stood before the Galactic Council, representing humanity to the assembled species of known space. She was a direct descendant of the admiral who had first declared the hunt, carrying a name that had become legendary among humans. Other species watched her with fear and fascination, wondering what message she would deliver. The delegates from the consortium have asked me to address the ongoing situation with the Vethkai. She began. They believe that after 1,000 years, humanity should consider ending its campaign. They say that we have made our point, and that continuing serves no purpose. She paused and looked around the chamber at the alien faces watching. I I want you all to understand something. Humanity is not a warrior species. We did not seek this war. We do not celebrate the suffering we have caused. We would have been happy to live in peace with the Vethkai, to trade with them, to learn from them, to build a future together. Her voice grew harder, but they chose differently. They saw us as vermin to be exterminated. They killed 14 billion of our people without warning, without mercy, without even a demand for surrender. They tried to erase us from the universe because they found our existence inconvenient. She slammed her hand on the podium. Let our answer to the Vethkai serve as a lesson to every species in this galaxy. We are patient, we are persistent, and we remember. Attack us and your children will pay. Your grandchildren will pay. 1,000 generations from now. Your descendants will still be paying. The chamber was silent. We are not conquerors. We are not empire builders. We are not monsters who destroy for pleasure. But we are something perhaps more dangerous. We are a species that never forgets and never forgives. We will carry our grudges to the end of time if we must. She looked directly at the representatives of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. So consider carefully before you threaten us. Consider carefully before you attack our worlds or harm our people. Because if you do, you will face the same fate as the Vethkai. We will hunt you and your kind across every star. We will follow you to the ends of the universe, and we will never, ever stop. She stepped back from the podium. Forever. Far away in a dark corner of the galaxy, a small refugee ship drifted through empty space. It carried 47 Vethkai, the last survivors of a community that had once numbered thousands. They had been running for 3 generations, moving from hiding place to hiding place, always staying one step ahead of the hunters. The ship's captain was an old female named Tessara. Her grandmother had told her stories of the Dominion's glory, of a time when the Vethkai ruled the stars and other species trembled before them. Those days seemed like ancient mythology now, impossible to believe. Alarms sounded on the bridge. Tessara looked at the sensors and felt her heart sink. A ship was approaching, moving impossibly fast on a direct intercept course. It was small and sleek, and it matched no design in any database. But Tessara knew exactly what it was. "Human hunter ship," she announced to her crew. "They have found us." There was panic among the younger Vethkai. Some wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Some wanted to fight, but they had no weapons. Some wanted to hide, but there was no escape on a ship this small. Tessara watched the approaching vessel with tired eyes. She was old, and she had spent her entire life running. She had watched her children grow up in fear, and her grandchildren learn that they were hated by the most powerful species in the galaxy. She was so very tired. "What do we do, Captain?" asked the young male, barely more than a hatchling. Tessara looked at him and saw the terror in his eyes. He had done nothing wrong. He had never hurt a human or even seen one. He was guilty only of being born with Vethkai blood in his veins. "We wait," she said softly. "We see what choice they offer us. And we remember that our ancestors did this to themselves. They believed extinction was a weapon they could use without consequence. They were wrong." The human ship drew closer, death coming on swift wings. 1,000 years after the Day of Fire, the hunt continued. It would continue forever.